Part 40. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mishita D. Chapter 392. 01 Armored Division has left the planet's orbit. Looking at the main control room, the 00 tanks were already in place. Wei Yan simply slapped the console, all troops attack. At the same time, in Gao Qiang's eyes, Wei Yan's originally locked feature unlocked another one. Regardless of the cost. Introduction, nothing can stop us from moving forward, not even death himself. Effect, when this unit is an officer, the damage caused by all our units to the enemy on the advancing route is increased by 50%. For every 10% of our total war units lost, the damage of all units will be increased by an additional 10%. After seeing the effects of the new features, Gao Qiang's eyes flashed with light. The more companions who die, the stronger those who remain will become. A good one at any cost. At the same time, in the flagship of the 13th Fleet, Song Yi heard a report from his crew. Manager, the tanks from the planet below are rushing towards us. Is there something wrong with your brain? Song Yi cursed subconsciously. After he finished scolding, he turned his eyes away and looked at the other person as if he was looking at a fool. After leading the 13th Fleet for so many years, he didn't even know that his own people still had this kind of weakness. Would you like to hear what you said? Song Yi raised his finger and pointed at the deck under his feet. Tanks are rushing towards our starship. Are you serious? That is to say, Song Yi is benevolent, which means that the person speaking is his own subject. If it were Song Ren or Song Dijun here, the speaker would have been thrown into the universe to feed worms. However, faced with Song Yi's questioning, the crew did not immediately admit their mistake. There was a hint of crying in his tone at this moment. No, Mr. Manager, everything I said is true. Why don't you come and see for yourself? While talking, the crew member threw all the parameters on the screen for fear that Song Yi would not believe it. These include the opponent's energy response and the modeling model automatically generated after radar scanning. Everything is no different from the tracked tanks of the industrial era. However, these tracked tanks, which looked normal, actually broke through the atmosphere and headed towards the 13th Fleet. While Song Yi was hesitating, those tanks were already approaching the outermost starships of the 13th Fleet. What a freak, Song Yi couldn't help but whisper. Being able to send an industrial-era tank into space made him really more and more curious about Gao Qiang's personal talent. To be on the safe side, Song Yi still asked about the number of these tanks. How many tanks are there? The crew below did not dare to neglect. After confirming the radar parameters, they quickly reported, the total number should not exceed 300. Only 300. A disdainful smile appeared on Song Yi's lips. He was really surrounded by himself before he felt what threat a few tanks that could fly into space would pose to him. Using 300 small tanks to deal with thousands of starships is impossible even if you think about it. Hitting a stone with an egg does not overestimate its own capabilities. Just handle such small matters yourself, and don't report it to the manager in the future. Speaking of this, Song Yi thought for a while and added another sentence. By the way, remember one thing, don't bomb the planets below. He was afraid that if he accidentally killed Gao Qiang, he would have to wait for how many years to find a suitable talent student next time. Yes. After the crew took the order, instructions were issued from the flagship. All starships fire freely, goal, annihilate all enemy units. After receiving the order, the starship immediately began to adjust the angle of the ship and pointed the muzzle in the direction of the tank below. Most of the lords also had a nonchalant attitude towards the tanks flying up from below, just like Song Yi. After all, those tanks are not as big as the cannons of starships. Using cannons to kill mosquitoes makes them look like they are bullying others. All artillery self-checks have been completed, there are no faults, and shooting is allowed. The next moment, streaks of bright light emerged in the space and exploded towards the oncoming tank cluster. The first attack hit the leading tank impartially. The lord under Song Yi's command had a disdainful smile visible to the naked eye. After all, it's just some tanks, isn't it? However, the next moment, the incredulous screams of the gunners rang out from each starship. We did not penetrate the enemy's armor. Ricochet. The beam is deflected. How could this be possible? The opponent did not raise the deflector shield at all. What the hell are you talking about? Listening to the shouting and yelling of the people below, Song Yi finally couldn't help but get angry. Patting his hands on the command platform, Song Yi stared at the many citizens controlling the starship below the bridge with a pair of cold eyes. Are these citizens going crazy today? Are they all trying to make fun of Song Yi? Song Yi still knew the configuration of the starships of the 13th Fleet. Even the perverted exoskeleton armor of the Zerg mothership can be penetrated with one shot. Now they are just fighting a few small tanks, but those guys are here to scream ricochet for him. God's pity is visible. Since entering the Thousand Stars era, Song Yi hasn't heard such an ancient word as ricochet for who knows how long. But, it really bounced. The gunner who was shocked by the ricochet was almost crying. There was no way, he himself did not believe what he said. But that was the truth. When the material acceleration shell carried by the starship hit the front armor of the tank, just like in the ancient ground battlefield, the shell directly rubbed the armor plate and bounced away, causing almost no damage. But this was not the ancient ground battlefield. With the caliber and penetration of the starship shells, it was almost impossible for such a thing to happen. And it was not just one tank, but almost all tanks. Inside the Supreme Command Center, Gao Qiang looked at his technology tree thoughtfully. After the upper limit of the technology tree was cut, the technology tree in Gao Qiang's panel became much longer. In particular, in many places where there were no branches before, corresponding circular technologies appeared. For example, what made the Type 00 main battle tank withstand the starship artillery fire was a circular technology called tilted armor. Tilted armor, 120. Introduction: by updating our armor design, our armored units will be more difficult to penetrate. Effect: our armored units are allowed to increase the caliber of ricochets by 10 mm. With the support of 120 layers of inclined armor, and the thickness of the armor of the main battle tank itself, it is almost impossible for artillery fire below 1.5 meters to effectively penetrate the Type 00 main battle tank. This caliber has exceeded the caliber of most of the 13th Fleet's naval guns. It can be said that unless the main gun or secondary gun of the starship directly fires and hits, it is almost impossible to penetrate a high-strength main battle tank. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 393. Mr. Manager, how about we try using the main gun? Some gunners took this into consideration and cautiously asked Song Yi. Use the main gun? Song Yi frowned. How can a small tank stop a starship-level main gun? Even if these tanks are destroyed through the main gun, what next? Those tanks are heading into space from the planet. Once they are destroyed, the remaining artillery fire will cover the surface of the planet with a devastating force. If one of the cannons happened to kill Gao Qiang, wouldn't his study plan fail? Thinking of this, Song Yi was suddenly shocked. There is a thief who wants to harm him. If he can't learn Gao Qiang's personal talents, then how can he strive for the position of the chief executive of Bio Consortium? How can a man lie between heaven and earth and live in depression for a long time? No, give me an order. All lords are not allowed to use main guns. If I find out, they will be expelled from the 13th Fleet immediately and treated as traitors. After issuing the order, Song Yi still felt unsafe. He immediately dispatched a group of cronies privately and ordered them to keep an eye on other lords to prevent them from violating the law. Even now, he still doesn't think a few tanks can do much damage to him. In terms of size, the starships of the 13th Fleet had completely crushed those tanks. No matter how bad the starship is, it at least has large caliber naval guns and a lot of auxiliary technology. What does the tank have? Ridiculously industrial-era armor-piercing projectiles? This is a space environment, and industrial-era ground weapons are simply not suitable for use here. Just as Song Yi was thinking this, in the flagship command interface, a peripheral standard ship was suddenly marked red and offline. Song Yi's expression froze on his face. Turning his head, he quickly asked his crew, "What just happened?" "Yes, those tanks opened fire." After the radar reconstructed the picture, a large number of crew members spent a lot of effort to sort out what had just happened at the outermost edge of the fleet. After entering the range, the 00 main battle tanks decisively attacked the nearest starship in front of them. It was obviously just artillery fire from the industrial age, but it exploded with a power no less than that of a starship. A starship hurriedly raised its deflector shield and was instantly penetrated. The remaining shells penetrated several modules of the starship. Fortunately, the starships of the White Feather Consortium were designed more cleverly and had many vacuum-sealed cabins to share risks, so those shells did not cause too much damage to the starships. What really brought a starship offline was a cannonball hitting the starship's power compartment. The damaged energy core directly self-destruct, causing the entire starship to explode on the spot. Seeing this, Song Yi frowned and breathed a sigh of relief. He admitted that he had underestimated those tanks, but now it seemed that the explosion of a starship was only a small probability event. The main reason why this happened should be blamed on the designer's poor structural design of the standard ship, which accidentally penetrated the energy core of the power cabin. In this case, Song Yi instantly had an idea. Anyway, he can't kill Gao Qiang these days. After these days, it won't matter to him if he cuts Gao Qiang to pieces with 1,000 knives. Even if I find a way, I still have to drag these days on. Let the main shield ships take over the first line of defense and withdraw all standard ships to the second line of defense. Song Yi's order was quickly issued. He still didn't believe that he really couldn't do anything with just a few hundred tanks. The main shield ship is more than 10 times the size of the standard ship. It was originally placed by Song Yi behind the 3 defense lines to protect the firepower ship. But nowadays, it's just right for dealing with those small tanks. Even the main battle tank, the strongest main force in the industrial era, is no more than a mosquito in front of the main shield ship. How many mosquito bites do you need to truly kill someone? In addition, release all carrier-based aircraft of our aircraft carrier and block those tanks from the shield ship. Another order was issued by Song Yi. At the same time, in the high command on the ground, as the 01 Armored Division established its position in space, the main control room regained the monitoring screen of space. Wei Yan put his chin on his hands and leaned against the console. Does the other party's commander only have this kind of strength? The tank units that are currently in the air are the degradation of military units from the Thousand Planets era. In other words, these tank units are equivalent to the ancient cruisers Gao Qiang saw before. But these are not the only military units owned by Gao Qiang. Wei Yan glanced to the side. It seems that the 401 agent battle has tasted the sweetness before. Knowing that he is not needed in the current battle, there is no point in being anxious or not. After handing over the command to Wei Yan, Gao Qiang was now hanging out with Shasha and others, looking like he was happy to be there. "What, Commander, do you want to play too?" Seeing Wei Yan staring here, Huan's hero showed a small tiger tooth and asked with a smile. "So when did she sneak over here, holding the game console with her? This is the most fashionable new gameplay in modern warfare. Commander, an old-timer like you will be out if you don't know how to play it. Ziobai, don't grab my handle." Looking at Huan's hero holding the game controller in one hand and holding Bai He-shiu's face with the other, preventing him from getting closer. There is a bit of joy in the fuss. Wei Yan frowned. He hated all those who didn't take war seriously, and hated those who compared war to a game. Obviously, neither Bai Hexiu, who was once the commander-in-chief, nor Huan's hero, the captain, took the war seriously. At this time, Huan's hero took advantage of the gap when pushing Bai Hexiu away. She took out a handle from somewhere and threw it to Gao Qiang. "Lord, try this, a brand new game, super fun." He took the handle thrown by Huan's hero. Gao Qiang saw that the game console brought by Huan's hero suddenly lit up, and a two-player split-screen game appeared. Our industrial titan has been prepared. The transport vehicle is in place and can be launched at any time. The so-called transport vehicle is a giant transport vehicle with a length of hundreds of meters. After Gao Qiang and Huan's hero pressed the ready button at the same time, the transport vehicles drove towards the sky in the screen. The sky again? Is this a model breaking or is it like this? Gao Qiang felt that the game he was playing now seemed to be wrong, but there was an indescribable sense of rationality. Then, the three words loading appeared on the screen of the game console. During this time, the main battle tanks in space had already come into contact with the carrier-based aircraft of the 13th Fleet's aircraft carrier. What Song Yi didn't expect was that these main battle tanks used anti-aircraft machine guns without hesitation. And the anti-aircraft machine guns of the industrial age were not inferior in the face of space combat. Tongues of fire attacked the approaching carrier-based aircraft. Not long after, the carrier-based aircraft that Song Yi usually didn't want to pull into the battlefield exploded into a ball of sparks and completely turned into space junk. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 394. I didn't care about the expensive carrier-based aircraft. Song Yi stretched out his fingers and rubbed his temples. At this point, he really couldn't understand why a high-strength tank could burst out with such combat power. It is not afraid of artillery fire, can cause damage to starships, and has point defense weapons against carrier-based aircraft. If it weren't for the clear display of tanks on the radar, he would have thought that it had collided head-on with someone's main fleet. At this time, the report from the crew below continued to come. According to the radar display, after being intercepted, the enemy not only did not stop moving forward, but also continued to approach our main shield ship. At this moment, the various communicators inside the 13th Fleet were busy directing the starship to change guard. When the main shield ship took over the defense of the outermost line of defense, the 00 type tank cluster was almost at this position. The tank's artillery fire continued. Just as Song Yi expected, the muzzle of the tank was too small. Even if it could penetrate the shield and armor of the main shield ship, it would not be so easy to be sunk given the size of the main shield ship. Moreover, it seemed that the sinking of a starship previously gave the other party too much confidence. In the flagship radar display, those flying tanks were actually about to collide directly with the outer armor of the main shield ship. The enemy is continuing to approach and is about to contact our main shield ship. Collision countdown, 3,2,1. Boom. The main shield ship that had just intervened in the outer front had its outer armor violently blown open, and the tank cluster directly broke in from the opening. Seeing the tank cluster disappear from the radar and almost all of them rushing into the interior of the main shield ship on the periphery, Song Yi suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. Looking at the radar screen in front of him, a relieved smile appeared on his face. What a bunch of idiots. He moved the main shield ship to the outermost periphery to delay time, but he didn't expect the other party to actually get in. You know, these shield ships don't seem to have many weapons installed, but in fact they are the killer weapons developed by the Bio Consortium against the Zerg. Under normal circumstances, the Zerg's biological shells are good at destroying starships from the inside, and the damage to the outer armor is limited. Therefore, in order to target the Zerg and to better resist the line, all the main shield ships have specialized internal weapons. In these main shield ships, almost every corridor has an automated defense system, and the entire ship has more than 30,000 Marines. The purpose of this design is to ensure that the Zerg cannot easily destroy the internal structure of the main shield ship, so that the main shield ship can survive longer on the front battlefield. I didn't expect that this trick would be used on other humans now. Connect me to the internal communication channels of several main shield ships. As Song Yi's order was issued, the internal monitoring screens from each main shield ship were quickly synchronized to the flagship bridge. In the picture, the first defense battlefield of each shield ship was all chosen in the warehouse. The main shield ship warehouse has a large space and a wide field of vision. And the transport shelves set up around it can just be used as a ready-made defense line to place high-powered lethal weapons. In the monitoring screen, the Marine commanders under the command of each lord have already arrived at the front line, and the Marines are hiding in the corners, ready for battle at any time. In the structural map of the main shield ship, the useless areas abandoned by the Marines are turning red one by one and finally offline. E09 shield ship, D42 area is offline, and the automatic firepower network in this area is completely destroyed. The target is moving towards the power room, all personnel are ready to intercept. As the broadcasts sounded again and again, in the eyes of everyone, a hole was directly blown open in the warehouse wall. The main battle tank from the industrial age broke into the warehouse without hesitation and was about to continue to move towards the next area. Rampant. Seeing that these old antique tanks could enter the no man's land, some commanders with bad tempers were furious and leaned out with weapons. Launch an attack. The appearance of the commander seemed to have ignited a fuse. Countless Marines rushed out from all directions of the warehouse, and greeted the main battle tanks with their weapons without hesitation. In an instant, there was a hail of bullets in the warehouse, and countless streamers of bullets attacked the main battle tanks that broke in. But the flying bullets failed to hurt the main battle tanks at all. On the contrary, after reacting, the Type 00 main battle tank stopped its advance and aimed its muzzle and barrel at the Marines everywhere around it. Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. The machine guns originally intended for air defense were now harvesting the lives of the Marines as easily as the scythe of the god of death. Screams came one after another. The Marines had almost no power to fight back, and fell in a pool of blood one after another. Even in the Thousand Stars era, the lives of ordinary humans are still so fragile. These main battle tanks seem to be proving with their own strength. Sir, the times have not changed. This scene was naturally seen by the commander on the scene. Fortunately, they did not expect these ordinary weapons to deal with things that even starships could not penetrate. After all, the guns in the hands of the Marines were only used to fight against the Zerg's unarmored units, and they could not deal with the Zerg with slightly thicker armor. These attacking Marines were just baits used to confuse the enemy and disrupt their judgment. The real killer weapon was just about to arrive. Thinking of this, several commanders in the warehouse hid back in a hidden corner and looked up. In the silent track above the warehouse, the high-temperature muskets used to melt metal had quietly approached the top of the Type 00 main battle tank. And the tanks were still unaware of this. They knew that these tanks could reflect the attacks of beam weapons to a certain extent. But flames are not within this range. In this case, let the opponent turn into molten iron. Attack. Hoo! High-temperature flames burst out from the musket nozzle, directly covering all the main battle tanks that broke in. The raging heat wave spread in the warehouse, forcing many Marines to stretch out their hands to block in front of them. Several commanders did not block it. They faced the raging heat wave and stared at the main battle tank in the center of the heat wave. At some point, the main battle tanks had stopped attacking. Yes, in such a terrifying flame, even the people in the vehicle would be burned. Just when everyone thought so, a deafening roar was heard from the gap in the wall blasted by the main battle tank. and in the highest command post on the surface of Ideal City. The game console in front of Gao Qiang and Huan's hero finally finished loading the black screen and the picture officially appeared. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mi Shida Di. Chapter 395. Several large characters slowly emerged from the screen of the game console. Act 1, Energy Core. Do you want to skip the tutorial? Jump, jump, jump. Completely ignoring Gao Qiang's lack of knowledge of the operation, Huan's hero quickly tapped the game controller and skipped all the stages that could be skipped. Then, the game console screen flashed, and two different battlefield scenes appeared in the split screen. What is this? Although Gao Qiang was not familiar with the scene in the screen, he still recognized the Type 00 main battle tank in front of him. Then he thought of the magnetic storm tank that was remotely controlled by the controller before. Gao Qiang was not a fool, and he quickly figured out what the game console brought by Huan's hero was about. If his understanding was correct, then what appeared on the game console screen at this moment should be the front-line battlefield that Wei Yan was commanding. Our industrial titan is officially put into use. Looking at the prompt flashing in the corner of the game console, Gao Qiang subconsciously checked the attribute interface of the game console. The attribute interface did pop up, but it was not a game console at all. Instead, Gao Qiang was currently operating Industrial Titan. Industrial Titan. Introduction, move, or demolish, these are the only two words in its dictionary, but be careful, because it is really heavy. Toughness, 300 add 600, cycle technology. Features, smash. Boom. Compared to Gao Qiang, who was still checking the attributes, Huan's hero, who was sitting next to Gao Qiang, had already started to operate it first. Under Huan's hero's operation, the hundreds-meter-high industrial titan slowly stood up in one of the main shield ships. Heavy metal collisions continued to sound. After crashing through the 5 decks of the main shield ship, the industrial titan barely stood firm. Then, Huan's hero pressed the handle and controlled the industrial titan to move forward, directly following the route of the main battle tank and crashing into the warehouse. Boom! In the horrified eyes of all the Marines, the industrial titan broke through the wall. Although the height of the warehouse was not low, it was just enough for the industrial titan to stretch its body. At this moment, this giant beast stood in the warehouse of the main shield ship, just like a giant standing tall. At this time, the game console popped up the main task in time. Rule of this round of game, smash it to your heart's content. Ha ha ha, I haven't encountered such an interesting task for a long time. Looking at the high-temperature musket that was flush with the head of the industrial titan and was coming quickly on the track, Huan's hero showed her little tiger teeth, squinted her eyes and pressed the grab button. In the eyes of the Marine commander, it was the industrial titan's mechanical hand with only thick pliers that grabbed forward and directly flattened the high-temperature musket and took it off the track. Things seemed to be going wrong. A few drops of cold sweat fell from the commander's head. The surrounding Marines had already stopped firing, and swallowed their saliva when they saw the industrial titan who easily took off the high-temperature musket. People always have fear of giants. Previously, many Marines dared to attack the main battle tank because they stood on various steel frames in the warehouse and occupied the advantage of height. Now that the industrial titan had broken through the wall, even if they climbed onto the steel frame, they would only reach the industrial titan's chest. Even if the industrial titan just walked around casually, it would bring them a terrible disaster. Generally speaking, the bad things you think of will always come true. In front of the game console, after Huan's hero successfully grabbed the high-temperature musket, she controlled the industrial titan to twist its body and smashed it hard at a steel frame. Boom boom boom. The industrial titan's arm strength was quite amazing, and the high-temperature musket that was embedded into scrap iron was smashed into a cannonball. Large numbers of steel frames and cargo elevators were smashed to pieces, and the Marines on them fell to the deck below like dumplings. After hitting the bottom, the high-temperature musket exploded violently, setting off a large sea of burning fire. He. Huan's hero smiled sideways, and then controlled the industrial titan to move forward step by step. Although there were no weapons or conventional means of attack, the Marines who blocked it were scared. Because an industrial titan of this tonnage, even if it just shakes its body, the warehouse will shake 3 times. Even if it just lifts its feet and lands, it can crush countless Marines into meat patties. Just like now, on the deck on the ground, there are Marines shouting in fear, but their eyes are filled with unshakable fear. Don't come over. Unfortunately, he is too small, and his voice can't reach the head of the industrial titan at all. Looking at the heavy mechanical legs getting closer and closer to him, the Marines only felt a chill under their buttocks, and they were scared to urinate. But the next moment, the mechanical legs ran over his head, and then he lost consciousness forever. This little episode was not taken seriously by anyone. Looking at the direction of the industrial titan's movement, the lord of the consortium in the shield ship's eyelids twitched, and he had a bad premonition in his heart. And this premonition was soon verified. The industrial titan smashed through countless facilities in the warehouse and then crashed directly into the dead-end wall in front of it. Seeing this, the lord on the shield ship looked ashen. Because he knew what was behind that wall. The power room of this main shield ship. That was the core position of the entire ship, because it was responsible for providing energy for the entire ship. But at the same time, it was also the most dangerous position of the entire ship. Because according to the technology of the consortium, the safety of the energy generation facilities is quite poor. It would be fine if there were no external forces. Once affected by external forces, even a small bullet could cause a violent explosion that could destroy the entire ship. Obviously, Huan's hero had no self-awareness. Under the Lord's bloodshot eyes in the shield ship, Huan's hero entered the power room and directly controlled the industrial titan to grab the energy core. The big pliers clamped directly towards the energy core. And the backlash of the energy core soon came. For the heavy and rough touch of the industrial titan, it would rather die than obey. I saw that under Huan's hero's clamping, the light in the center of the energy core suddenly went out, and then a violent explosion swept the entire shield ship. My ship. In the flagship, Songyi looked at one of the surveillance screens in front of him and fell into silence. He didn't think much of losing a standard ship before. Now a main shield ship exploded in front of him, and he felt so heartbroken. It was nothing, it was just too expensive. A main shield ship is 10 times the size of a standard ship, but the cost is more than 10 times. He sent the main shield ship just to delay time, but he didn't really treat it as cannon fodder. As a result, this treasure, which the entire 13th Fleet didn't have many of, actually exploded in front of him. Fortunately, Songyi glanced at the personal interface. After such a long time, learning Gao Qiang's talent has been completed for the most part. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 396. In the Supreme Command Center, Bai Hexio lay softly on the sofa behind Gao Qiang and yawned in boredom. You are the first one to run away when something happens, but you don't take me to play when there is something fun. Muttered a few words in dissatisfaction. Bai Hexio glanced at the screen in the game console. Huan's hero had finished the battle, and half of the screen entered the black screen loading stage again. Gao Qiang's half was still motionless. Lord, if you don't want to play, why don't you let me play? Hearing this, Gao Qiang looked at the handle in his hand. The operation of the industrial mecha is cumbersome and awkward, so Gao Qiang has not yet adapted to the operation method of this mecha. Then, why don't you play it, Xiaobai? Gao Qiang hesitated and said. As soon as the voice fell, the handle disappeared in Gao Qiang's hand. Bai Hexio did a front flip and sat next to Gao Qiang. He, this is what you said, Lord. Let Lord see what kind of strength I have as the fastest man in the universe. So when did I become the fastest in the universe? Gao Qiang pulled the corner of his mouth, but his eyes were looking at the screen of the game console. Because Gao Qiang did not operate it before, the Industrial Titan was still in place at this moment. After Bai Hexio got started, he instantly played a cooler operation than Huan's hero. I saw that one arm of the Industrial Titan smashed through the bulkhead and pulled out a pipe that was still emitting white nitrogen from the cabin of the shield ship. Ding 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 ding, coolant delivery pipe. There is no such audio in the game console, so the above is completely dubbed by Bai Hexio himself. In the picture, liquid nitrogen flows out of the pipe, covering the surrounding with a layer of frost. Bai Hexio smiled. He, a legendary weapon. Then, Gao Qiang saw Bai Hexio twisting the handle quickly, and the whole handle clicked in Bai Hexio's hand. Correspondingly, the mechanical clamp of the Industrial Titan in the picture also rotated at high speed. The coolant delivery pipeline was dancing like a rotating windmill. At this time, Bai Hexio also pushed forward with his left hand, controlling the Industrial Titan to move forward. Since the internal module structure of the main shield ship is almost the same, the Industrial Titan controlled by Bai Hexio also quickly arrived at the warehouse. And this time, with the arrival of the Industrial Titan, a large amount of leaked coolant also poured in through the gap. The biting cold wind instantly spread in the warehouse. The many Marines hiding in the warehouse did not even have time to scream, and they were frozen into pieces of fragile ice sculptures. Too slow, running too slowly. Bai Hexio muttered while continuing to control the unstoppable Industrial Titan to move forward. The sound of metal being smashed continued to be heard in the warehouse. As the Industrial Titan carried the conveying pipe that was swung like a windmill and wreaked havoc in the warehouse. The defense line that the Marines had finally established was smashed to pieces in almost an instant. On the smashed steel frames and cargo elevators, broken ice sculptures could be vaguely seen. At the same time, the bridge of this main shield ship was in chaos. The temperature inside the ship is below the warning line, the automatic valve is invalid, and the coolant leakage area cannot be isolated. The backup plan is being activated. Wait, an intruder broke into the power room. The bridge fell into a moment of silence. Thinking of a main shield ship that had exploded next to them before, they seemed to have guessed their fate. At this moment, the dazzling light approached instantly and swallowed the consciousness of all the crew members. Click. The highest command center also fell into silence. Beside the sofa, everyone silently looked at Bai Hexio and the handle in his hand that was broken because of too violent operation. Feeling the cold air gradually rising beside him, Bai Hexio said weakly, I said it's because the quality of the handle is too poor, do you believe it? What greeted him was Huan's hero's roar of an octave higher, Zio Bai. Lord, have fun. As he said that, Bai Hexio turned around and tried to slip away, but was caught by Huan's hero, who rode on him and refused to let go. Sasha, who witnessed the whole process, ate a mouthful of potato chips silently. After Gilo swallowed the potato chips, he said with some emotion, wow, you two have a good relationship. Bang. Julio used his fist to make Sasha swallow all the words she was going to say. If you don't speak, no one will think you are dumb. As he said that, without looking at Sasha's tearful eyes, he turned his head and took Gao Qiang's hand and walked to the side. Let's calculate the time. Wian is going crazy again. Lord, come with me to hide now. When Julio mentioned Wian, Gao Qiang noticed that there was one less person in the Supreme Command. It seemed that because he was ignored by everyone, Wian ran away alone. Is he scary when he goes crazy? Following Julio's steps, Gao Qiang asked curiously. That's not the case. Julio shook his head, he's not a mental patient, he just has an extreme personality. That's right. At this time, Sasha's little head came up from behind Gao Qiang. She whispered to Gao Qiang's ear, "I told you, Lord, Uncle Wayan was frozen a long time ago. I heard that our ancestors were fighting every day at that time." Right. Sasha looked around and made sure there were no outsiders before continuing. It is said that when Uncle Wayan leads a team, the number of his men who survive never exceeds half. I see, Uncle Wayan was led astray by his ancestors, so he thinks about fighting every day. Aren't snacks delicious? Boom. Julugo's fist arrived late but kissed Sasha's forehead. Sasha, how many times have I told you not to plot loudly? Julugo's sinister smile contained a hint of helplessness. Anyway, for Sasha, she won't listen no matter what the lesson. Sure enough, Sasha covered her forehead and stuck out her tongue at Julugo. I clearly remember Sister Julugo's words this time. It doesn't count as a loud conspiracy if I'm not here. As if she had gained confidence, Sasha argued firmly this time. But the next moment, Julugo took out 2 steaming skewers of meat from nowhere. Meat. Sasha's voice fell, and the meat skewers in Julugo's hands disappeared in an instant. Well, I'll forgive you this time. After listening to Sasha's words, Julugo shook his head helplessly, stopped and pushed open a heavy steel door. Behind the steel door, there is a neat table of meals. By the way, I seem to have forgotten to mention this, Julugo said. Escape is secondary. I mainly want to remind the Lord that you have been playing all day, so remember to eat well. Gao Qiang opened his mouth, but before any sound came out, Julugo blocked his mouth with a piece of barbecue. Your hedonist talent is fulfilled. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 397. At the same time, Song Yizheng, the flagship of the 13th Fleet, was staring at his personal panel. His eyes were filled with anticipation and nervousness. Because soon, he will get rid of the blank slate talent of those who achieve first will usher in his true personal talent. For this reason, even a main shield ship that exploded later was temporarily thrown aside by Song Yi. 99.97%. 99.98%. Finally, is it coming? What kind of heaven-defying talent does this lord possess that can make Song Dijun extremely fearful and even want to raise an army to suppress the situation? Can you help him win the position of chief executive? Under Song Yi's extremely expectant eyes, the prompt of the war game finally arrived. You have successfully learned your personal talent, hedonist. Do you confirm your learning? Note, after confirming your study, you will lose your personal talent, those who master first. Confirm. Song Yi didn't even have time to see what kind of talent he had learned, so he couldn't wait to confirm the learning. In any case, is there any talent worse than a whiteboard? The moment Song Yi confirmed his learning talent, he felt that the atmosphere in the entire bridge had changed. Compared to the solemn atmosphere before. At this moment, many citizens in the bridge felt an inexplicable sense of relief. Is this what it feels like to be powerful? Feeling the confidence brought by becoming stronger, Song Yi subconsciously opened his personal panel and checked the personal talent content he had learned. At first glance, Song Yi's eyes were dazzled by the dense handwriting that looked like a small composition. He can guarantee that so far, he has never seen anyone whose personal talent needs so many words to describe. It even has 5 characteristics. The second glance made Song Yi stunned. Enjoy. Introduction: you are keen on playing the flute every night and try your best to avoid most things that are difficult for you. Even the gods will sigh when they see your fighting spirit. Effect 1, the initial value of your territory's war exhaustion is 50%. When the war exhaustion reaches 100%, the territorial citizens will force you to enter a peaceful state. If you cannot enter a peaceful state, the territorial citizens will give priority to killing you. Effect 2, the subject's execution efficiency of your orders is 80%. When the execution efficiency is lower than 100%, the subjects have a chance to ignore your orders. Effect 3. After wiping his eyes to make sure he wasn't dazzled, Song Yi sat down on the chair. He no longer wanted to see the subsequent effects. The initial war exhaustion is 50%. Execution efficiency 80%. All he needs to say is that his people will not listen to the propaganda. No, how is it possible that someone's personal talent is worse than a whiteboard? And with such personal talent, why should this kind of person become Song Dijun's major concern? Could it be? Song Yi was startled, and he thought of a possibility. Could it be that Song Dijun's biggest problem is not Gao Qiang at all? Thinking about it this way, he was confused. How could a planet be so huge and only accommodate one human lord? Just like under his command, although the 13th Fleet only has 1,000 starships, it actually has more than 2,000 lords. Come to think of it, Gao Qiang is just a minion serving Song Dijun, who has a serious problem in his heart. Bah, you ruthless guy, Song Yi cursed secretly. Song Dijun deliberately gave him a wrong name. He must have read his mind and deliberately destroyed his opportunity to learn his personal talent. From then on, his talent was not good enough and he had no hope of becoming a chief executive, so he could only stay under Song Dijun without threatening his position. Thinking of this, Song Yi slammed the console. He got it completely. Unexpectedly, he, Song Yi, who lived a brilliant life, would end up here now. Now Song Yi gets angry when he sees the planet below. He should have realized a long time ago that a truly powerful talent cannot be learned in a day. It takes 2 days to learn even if there is no physical fitness talent. That is to say, it is a garbage talent like the hedonist that can do nothing, and it can be completely learned in just 1 day. Pass my order and all the 13th Fleet will enter orbital bombing posture. At this moment, Song Yi was controlled by anger, and he just wanted to blow up the planet below as soon as possible to relieve his hatred. However, facing the current Song Yi, the people under his command did not have much fear. One by one, they lazily dialed the communication and slowly laid out the orders given by Song Yi. Some people even just gave up their game and just lay idle on their chairs fishing. Only when Song Yi was watching them would they pretend to struggle for a while. Seeing this, Song Yi's heart dropped. If the consortium was full of such employees, I'm afraid it would be disbanded within half a day. It is conceivable that after learning the rubbish talent of hedonist, his status in the consortium will inevitably decline rapidly in the future. Perhaps he might not be able to keep his identity as manager of thousands of lords. And this was all because he was deceived by Song Dijun and learned that powerful personal talent. Damn it! Despite the scolding, fortunately, the people under Song Yi's command did not really give up. Although the order was passed in confusion, the general meaning was still transmitted to the Cambridges of various starships. As the elite of the consortium, the 13th Fleet is generally well trained after all. The outermost front was still fighting with the tank cluster, while the remaining starships had already pointed their guns at the direction of the ideal city and were ready for bombing. Then, countless artillery fire fell from the sky, like falling meteors, covering the entire sky. Outside the Supreme Command, Vian raised his head slightly, looked at the Mars falling from the sky, and opened his arms. It should be like this. This is war, not a game for children to play house. Only by tasting despair can we become despair. At the same time, Vian's feature column unlocked another one. Beyond despair. Introduction, we overcome the fear of being unarmed, before the disaster comes completely. Effect, when this unit is an officer, if the enemy unit's military technology level is greater than ours, as the war progresses, our military technology level will be gradually improved to make up for it. Before I fall into eternal sleep, I will send a lament to the monument of every enemy. As he said, Vian raised his hand and pointed to the location where the artillery fire came from in the sky. Countless surface-to-air missiles with tails of smoke shot up from every corner of the ideal city and headed straight for the sky. In a place that Gao Qiang did not notice, the military sector of the technology tree was rising steadily. Even if it was just a little bit of a branch, it broke through the upper limit of the 5th level technology tree and returned to the era of the 6th level again. How is this possible? In the flagship of the 13th Fleet, Song Yi, who was about to shout to intercept the surface-to-air missile, got his words stuck in his throat. Because just now, the radar flashed, and the surface-to-air missile that could have been locked actually entered an undetectable state. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mi Shida Di. Chapter 398. At this time, the 13th Fleet's first round of orbital bombardment also landed on the ground. Countless industrial buildings with black smoke instantly turned into a sea of flames, and the shock wave set off on the surface of the planet even messed up Wei An's hair. That is to say, Gao Qiang was brought into the air defense facility by Zhuoluo first, and he was not aware of what was happening outside. However, Gao Qiang still saw the prompt of the war game. You have obtained the reason for war against the human lord Song Yi and Song Dijun, punishment. Is the war officially starting outside? Gao Qiang wiped his mouth with a handkerchief and asked. The 13th Fleet did not directly launch a bombing when it arrived, which was obviously unreasonable. He and Gao Qiang are neither relatives nor friends, so how could he be merciful to Gao Qiang? Zhuoluo glanced at the closed steel door behind him and nodded. It should be, but with Commander Wei An's character, it shouldn't take long for it to end. And Zhuoluo paused for a moment, then said, you should also know that we have a lot of people now. That means Wei An is not the only one facing the enemy outside now, Gao Qiang guessed. Ideal City planetary orbit. As the first round of orbital bombing ended, countless surface-to-air missiles rising from the ground also broke through the shackles of the atmosphere and rushed into the universe. After leaving the atmosphere, the ballistic speed of the surface-to-air missile became faster and faster, spinning at high speed and flying towards the 13th Fleet. Most of the lords in the 13th Fleet could only watch the missiles zooming in their field of vision, while the point defense systems equipped on the starships remained indifferent. Boom boom boom. Millions of light points erupted within the 13th Fleet. The signs belonging to one's own starships quickly disappeared inside the flagship. The T3 formation was completely destroyed, and there was no survival signal. The damage of the left-wing patrol fleet is estimated to be 63%, and it is still rising. The B9 main shield ship was damaged by 31% and is undergoing emergency repairs. Listening to the feeble reports from the people under his command, Song Yi felt very harsh. Until now, he still hadn't figured out how those old missiles propelled by inefficient chemical energy could break through the atmosphere and then blast through the shields and armor of the 13th Fleet. In fact, the loss should not have been so big. According to original estimates, these surface-to-air missiles should have been dealt with by the point defense system of the 13th Fleet the moment they left the planet's atmosphere. But that's exactly where the problem lies. While the point defense of the 13th Fleet was intact, it perfectly missed all surface-to-air missiles because it could not be locked. I was so blind that I let those designers install these useless point defense systems. Song Yi continued to issue orders while cursing. All formations with minor damage will continue to carry out orbital bombing operations. Isn't it just a confrontation? He still didn't believe it. Could a mere Sanren lord, using technology that hadn't even been launched into the air, be able to annihilate a fleet as big as his 13? Thinking of this, Song Yi heard a laugh. Oh ho ho ho. No, he didn't smile just now. Song Yi turned around suddenly and saw an old man already very close to him, and was instantly frightened into a cold sweat. Who are you and how did you get in? As he spoke, Song Yi stepped back and did not stop until he touched the console and was unable to retreat. He couldn't even imagine what would have happened if the old man hadn't laughed just now, but instead took out a dagger and stabbed himself in the heart. This is also the biggest shortcoming of the human race. No matter how strong the shell of the starship is, the people wrapped in it are still fragile. If they were not wearing high-density combat uniforms, even picking up a random stone could easily kill fragile humans like them. Seeing that the old man didn't speak, Song Yi's face turned grim, and he pressed the flagship's alarm on the console with his backhand. Since the imaginary enemy is the Zerg, the internal configuration of his flagship is also quite luxurious. Almost the entire 13th Fleet's most elite marine troops and equipment are placed in the flagship. As the alarm is raised, it won't be long before the Marines swarm in and beat the old man in front of him into a sieve. However, 10 seconds passed, and 20 seconds passed. The entire bridge was quiet, except for the crew below who heard the alarm and glanced up at Song Yi. But after seeing Song Yi still alive and kicking, he turned his head back. Song Yi's palms became increasingly sweaty. He no longer wants to ask why. Ever since he came here according to Song Dijun's order, he has had more whys popping up in his mind than in his whole life. At this time, seeing that no one was paying attention to Song Yi, the old man finally spoke slowly. "My name is Gao Yuan. As for how you got in." Gao Yuan pointed to the wide open hatch at the back. "Of course that's how I walked in." "You killed them all," Song Yi shouted subconsciously. The open hatch and the motionless Marines made him think of something. But how is this possible? How could the Marines deployed on the flagship be killed by a mere old man? Facing Song Yi's question, Gao Yuan's face darkened. Vulgar language. How can a scholar do such a thing as fighting and killing? I just locked the door of the passage outside and locked them out. Song Yi breathed a sigh of relief after hearing this. But soon his heart was hanging again. He frowned and looked at Gao Yuan. Impossible. The 13th Fleet uses fully automated facilities. Even the simplest door opening and closing requires permission. As for you. Song Yi looked at Gao Yuan, who was wearing cloth in front of him. He didn't think Gao Yuan had the permission to close the hatch. Summer insects can't talk about ice. With your wisdom, I really don't want to say more. At this point, Gao Yuan didn't explain too much, but walked forward and pushed Song Yi away. He is a scholar. As he said, he would not do such things as killing people in most cases. As for the purpose of his coming here now. Under Song Yi's incredulous eyes, Gao Yuan put one hand on the control console and operated it quickly. One can learn from others' experience. As human beings, I don't know who gave you the confidence that I can't learn your skills. After he finished speaking, Song Yi heard the weak voice of the crew members below. Manager, our firewall was hacked from the inside. This hacker is a bit strong. We can't hold on. Let's rest first. Manager, please think of a solution. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 399. No rest. Song Yi subconsciously spoke, but immediately reacted. Who else could be the hacker who broke through the firewall from within besides Gao Yuan, who was operating on the console in front of him? This guy, dressed in aboriginal attire, actually has this ability. Although Gao Yuan did not show any hostility towards Song Yi, the alarm bell in Song Yi's heart became louder and louder. Seeing that Gao Yuan really didn't mean to hurt himself, Song Yi rolled his eyes, quietly moved towards the back, gradually opened the weapons cabinet placed next to the door, and took an assault rifle in his hand. Seeing that Gao Yuan hadn't paid attention to him yet, Song Yi showed a sinister smile on his lips. With a gun, you have confidence. So, go to hell and repent for your fault. Chug tug tug. The assault rifle continued to emit flames, covering the console area. It wasn't until all the magazines were used up that Song Yi put down his hand and looked forward. However, he saw only a few broken pieces of cloth falling where he was shot. But Gao Yuan, who was standing in front of the console, has long since disappeared. Where are people? Just when Song Yi had this idea, Gao Yuan's voice came from the door. You really don't know how to respect the elderly and care for the young. Fortunately, I am very agile, otherwise I might not be able to leave today. What a risk, what a risk. Song Yi turned his head and looked in the direction of the sound. However, Gao Yuan was seen walking away with his hands behind his back, and only the last faint sound came. Don't worry, I'm not good at killing people. As the voice fell, the hatch that had been opened by Gao Yuan inexplicably was closed. So what is that old guy here for? Song Yi asked with some confusion. He didn't expect anyone to give him an answer. But he heard the frightened voices of the crew below. Manager, I have some bad news. I wonder if you want to hear it? Song Yi frowned and said, say. The crew member swallowed before continuing, that's right, our automatic defense system and identification friend or foe were swapped by hackers. Song Yi was stunned. According to the original defense system, humans are friendly forces and Zerg are enemies. Even if the Marines die, the automatic defense system in the flagship can eliminate a large number of intruders who dare to break in without permission. Now that the identification of friend or foe has been reversed, doesn't it mean? Now, are they the intruders that the automatic defense system wants to eradicate? Song Yi looked up in shock, only to see dozens of silently rotating turrets descending from the ceiling above. The crew member who had just reported was already lying lifeless in a pool of blood. C1 formation is calling the flagship. If you hear it, please reply. If you hear it, please reply. Strike formation calls flagship, requesting further instructions. The console covered with pools of blood kept hearing calls from various units of the 13th Fleet. But all communications seemed to be in vain, with no response from anyone. The upward blow from the surface continues. Missiles soaring into the sky rained down on the shields and armor of the 13th Fleet like free money. The command system was paralyzed at this moment, causing the entire 13th Fleet to completely lose its direction. Whether to continue the attack or prepare to retreat, each lord has a different view, but they are unable to implement it because they have to take others into consideration. By the time all the lords suddenly woke up and wanted to unify their opinions, it was already too late. Now sweep around. In the huge 13th Fleet, only 2 or 3 big cats and kittens were left under the continuous bombardment of missiles. Retreat, retreat quickly. After finally realizing that something was wrong, the less than 100 remaining starships finally reached a consensus and escaped from the orbit of Ideal City with their broken hulls. The flagship, which no longer had any survivors, was left where it was. Grown-ups. On the screen in front of Song Dijun, the lords who had just withdrawn from the battlefield were reporting with anxiety. So many people attacked a lord whose strength was only that of the industrial age, and they were still able to achieve a humiliating defeat. They were all ashamed of themselves and wished they had deposed themselves. In contrast, it was Song Dijun's calm expression. I see. After a simple reply, Song Dijun casually closed the communication with the remnants of the 13th Fleet. The remaining 2 or 3 big cats and kittens are no longer enough to support a large fleet symbol. Therefore, Song Dijun just casually ordered to other fleet commanders around him, those people, you can do whatever you want. Seeing that half of the people nodded and left the Thor, Song Dijun lay down on the chair and turned 180 degrees to the rear. So, did you expect this? Song Dijun spoke to himself, as if he was questioning himself, and also seemed to be questioning the voice in his head. Are you sad about their deaths? The voice in my head asked. That's not true. Song Dijun's voice was calm, they are just 2 distant relatives. Without me, they would not be where they are today. They are not the only people who want to have something to do with me. Yes, all those people down there are just consumables, the voice in his mind replied. Remember, you haven't failed yet. Every next tomorrow, they get weaker, and this is your chance. As long as I'm here, you won't lose. At this time, someone next to him suddenly called Song Di-jun's name. Song Di-jun slowly recovered from the voice in his mind, but he was still in a daze. If he hadn't seen the unlimited firepower of the Thor before, he might have really thought that he was going crazy. Shaking his head, he drove out all the messy thoughts. Song Di-jun then returned to his indifference and looked at the person who called him. Fenzhou, commander of the 7th Fleet. Now he is still standing here, seemingly not interested in the remnants of the 13th Fleet. What's the matter? Song Di-jun asked coldly. Fenzhou is not considered his direct descendant. If he didn't have the status of a consortium chief, he wouldn't be able to command Fenzhou. And if he loses this war game and causes the Bioconsortium to lose a large amount of land, his position as the chief executive may be over. By then, his family might even be implicated and become the victims of other executives venting their dissatisfaction with Song Di-jun. It seems that you are in a difficult situation, Lao Song. Fenzhou seemed to be unable to see Song Di-jun's cold face and chuckled. What problem is troubling you so much? Why don't you let me help you? After all, I'm not one of those losers. Fenzhou specifically emphasized the word waste, clearly disdainful of Song Ren and Song Yi. And he does have this qualification. In Fenzhou's hands, he controls the 7th Fleet of the Bioconsortium, which currently has the strongest air and ground firepower. If it fires with all its strength, it can turn a Zerg home planet into a sea of fire within 24 hours. Seeing Fenzhou's arrogant look, Song Di-jun slowly raised the corners of his mouth. Good. Since Fenzhou wanted to take a trip into this muddy water, what if he gave up the opportunity to Fenzhou? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 400. Your characteristic degeneration theory has been triggered. Advance means retreat. Tomorrow will be weaker than today. This week, your technology tree cap is Renaissance, level 3. All your buildings and military forces are in a state of regression, and will soon be transformed into Renaissance units. In the ideal city, the countless factories in front of Gaoqiang with thick black smoke disappeared, replaced by an endless plain like the world in the painting. Even the Supreme Command is no longer the steel tortoise shell without any aesthetic sense, but has turned into a bright and spacious palace. It has been a few days since the 13th Fleet retreated. Under the effect of the degeneration theory, Gaoqiang seemed to have become even poorer on the surface. At this time, Gaoqiang turned his head and asked curiously. Why didn't you take the opportunity before to let me declare war on Song Di-jun? When the 13th Fleet retreated, he could have taken the opportunity to declare war on Song Di-jun. Even if it was the industrial age, with the existence of tanks and titans, Gaoqiang would not necessarily lose to Song Di-jun. But just when Gaoqiang was about to do that, Wei Yan stopped him. Wei Yan did not answer the reason at that time. It was not until now in the Renaissance age, when Gaoqiang lost his tank formation, that Wei Yan slowly spoke. The guy the Lord mentioned is just a small minion. If we beat him too hard now, how can the Dark Hand hiding in the dark have the courage to appear in front of us? While speaking, Wei Yan smiled. The other party will not be able to help it. As for now, I'd better lead the Lord to see an old guy. Old guy. In the 7th Fleet, Fenzhou sat cross-legged in the captain's seat, leaning back without any image. Compared with the tit-for-tat when talking to Song Di-jun before, Fenzhou's expression at this moment was full of casualness. Next to him, the adjutant standing upright seemed to be hesitant to speak. He opened his mouth and asked, "Manager, why are you doing this?" Feng Zhou glanced at him and said with a smile, "Why, are you blaming me for taking on this task?" "I dare not," the adjutant responded quickly. After a moment of hesitation, he continued to remind him, "You also know that Mr. Song is still the chief supervisor. We are new here. If we offend him, I am afraid." "Okay, okay." Feng Zhou waved his hand and interrupted what the adjutant wanted to say. He understood what the adjutant meant. Compared to people like Song Dijun who stepped up to become a chief supervisor, lords like him who were airborne and participated in the war game for the first time were always less reassuring. But the other party didn't know that only those who entered the high-level battlefield for the first time in the war game had a better chance of obtaining the strongest type of territory. Many of the territories that the so-called geniuses had fixed in the low-level battlefield were not good enough after they came to the high-level battlefield. Feng Zhou stretched out a finger and shook it in the air. "Don't compare me with the useless people like the three heroes of the Song family. One is immoral, one is unkind, and one is unjust. The Song family has a bunch of good sons. In fact, strictly speaking, the three of the Song family are older than you," the adjutant reminded at the right time. "Hey, are you excited?" Feng Zhou glared back fiercely. Then he waved his hand in boredom. "Go away, go and play by yourself, don't talk to this manager if you have nothing to do." "Yes." The adjutant responded to Feng Zhou's order and turned to walk back. But halfway through, as if he thought of something, he turned back and reminded, "In fact, I am older than you, manager. Get lost." After throwing his shoes to drive the adjutant away, Feng Zhou leaned on the armrest of the chair, supported his face with his hands, and looked at the screen that suddenly rose in front of him leisurely. "I have offended that wicked guy Song Dijun thoroughly, so are you satisfied now?" In response to Feng Zhou's inquiry, a virtual figure appeared on the screen. "According to the analysis, your current survival rate has increased by 10 percentage points." "Only 10? Feng Zhou frowned, "But you said that Song Dijun is the biggest obstacle to my life in this war game." If someone else said this, Feng Zhou might have just laughed it off. After all, no matter how wicked Song Dijun is, he can't directly kill him, a senior executive of his own side. Song Dijun's value to the consortium is not so high. But the existence of saying this comes from the type of his territory. Only in a high-level battlefield can you get a top-quality territory. Pioneer Gospel, Insight. Introduction. The first pioneers of the world have long disappeared in the long river of time, and only a tiny trace proves that they once existed. Effect. Your civilization was born because of the pioneers. When you enter the war game, your territory automatically obtains a pioneer technology. The virtual figure who is talking to him now is the pioneer technology that Feng Zhou obtained after entering this war game, the Insight Plan. It's ridiculous that Song Dijun actually thinks that everyone except him is a fool. The Thor, which can fire infinitely, can be detected by any human with eyes. And since the battle with the Zerg, the Insight Project has sent a warning to Feng Zhou. Behind Song Dijun is a person who should not be united. If he continues to follow Song Dijun, the probability of survival is only a pitiful 10%. Your survival rate has increased by 10%. That is to say, after leaving Song Dijun, my survival rate is only 20%. Feng Zhou's face darkened. "Are you mistaken? What's the matter? Do I have a deep hatred with that Song guy? He wants to kill me across half the universe." "No." The Insight Plan gave a negative answer. "In fact, when you choose to leave Song Dijun, your chance of survival increases by 80%, but the mission you took on later reduces your survival rate by 70%. Hey, I'm talking to you." Feng Zhou pointed at the Insight Plan in front of him unhappily, and felt a red word vegetable rising from his head. So no matter who he is against, his survival rate is not high. How can this broken machine be more poisonous than his adjutant's mouth? Is this pioneer technology? Then you should think of a way for me. Faced with Feng Zhou's question, Inside Plan's face flickered twice. Okay, I'm generating a plan for you. The plan is as follows: summon the highest wisdom fleets from the 1st to the 9th sequence. For each successful summoning of a fleet, your survival rate is expected to increase by 10%. Of course, since I can't connect to the network, in order to make a more informed decision, it is recommended that you consult relevant consultants and then make a decision based on your own risk tolerance. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mishida De. Chapter 401. Shut up, please. Feng Zhou lay down on the chair and sighed helplessly. Obviously, in many aspects, Inside Plan can give perfect suggestions. For example, when fighting against the Zerg, the Inside Project can see almost every step of the Zerg's layout, which is also the core method for him to control the 7th Fleet. If it weren't for the crushing advantage of the Zerg, Feng Zhou felt that humans would not necessarily lose with the Inside Plan in his hand. But once faced with Song Dijun's problem, the Inside Plan seemed to have lost its mind. All plans were to summon the Supreme Wisdom Fleet. Feng Zhou originally thought it was a good trick. After several inquiries, I found out that the so-called Supreme Intelligence Fleet belonged to the pioneer civilization that created the Inside Project. According to the descriptions of pioneers, all civilizations that can be called pioneers have not even a scum left. They have existed for so long that their complete demise was before the birth of this generation of civilization. Even if Feng Zhou digs a grave for the fleet of the most intelligent fleet according to Inside Plan, he won't be able to dig out even half a tile. Forget it, forget it. Feng Zhou shook his head and shook off the helpless look on his face. Then he put on a serious face and looked at the Inside Plan in front of him. Since you judge that Song Dijun poses a great threat to my survival rate, you should have seen through him. Now we are out of Song Dijun's sight. Can you tell me what is behind Song Dijun? Mistake. According to Article 77 of the Inside Agreement, the Inside Agreement cannot disclose unknown related information unless the authority is, delete, or above. Your current permissions are, borrowing. Warning, insufficient permissions. Feng Zhou was stunned for 2 seconds. This was the first time he saw the words insufficient authority in front of the Inside Project. In the past, even if he wanted to know the color of the insect mother's underwear, the Inside Project would be able to tell him. You can even tell him what elements are included in the underwear. Is this Song Dijun really so special? Then tell me who Song Dijun's enemy is. Unable to obtain Song Dijun's secret from the Inside Project, Feng Zhou could only do the next best thing and ask for information about this target. He took over the task of getting rid of Gao Qiang from Song Dijun. But he was very curious about how terrifying the other party was, so that the threat to his survival was only slightly weaker than Song Dijun. This time, the Inside Project reported no errors and quickly informed Song Dijun of the information he wanted. Territory, wall of size. Estimated lifespan, 10,000 to 100,000 years. The Great Battle, brief. Evaluation, a once glorious, ancient, and highly developed civilization. Fortunately, they are declining and you can even wonder if they still understand the technology they have. Suggestion 1, we should avoid their presence before we reach the height where they stand. Suggestion 2, convene the first fleet of the highest intelligence. Stop. After seeing suggestion 2, Feng Zhou stopped the Inside Plan suggestion. Your suggestion is very good. I suggest you don't suggest it again in the future. Now you just need to tell me what level they are. Inside planned a moment of silence. Renaissance. Renaissance. Feng Zhou looked at the Inside Plan with a look that looked like a fool. Originally, he was thinking that this war game had only been around for a few years, so how could there be a lord whose territory had existed longer than his life? It's a 1,000-year civilization, and it's like a soul ring. As a result, the Inside Project now told him that the other party was only equivalent to the Renaissance era. Hey, whose family is a native of 10,000 years? After realizing this, Feng Zhou turned his face to the side and smiled disdainfully. This alone can pose a 70% threat to my survival rate. I think you are also old and confused. Warning, based on your actions, the current threat value of the other party to you is no less than Song Dijun. Now, I said. Feng Zhou asked towards the Inside Project, if I can defeat that Sanren Lord, what are my chances of winning against the existence behind Song Dijun? 0%. Cut. Feng Zhou curled his lips after hearing the disappointing remarks from the Inside Project. Okay, you dog can't spit out ivory from your mouth. This time I just deal with Song Dijun casually, wander around and find a quiet corner to watch the show. How high can the survival rate be increased? 50%. The farther you are from the two, the higher your survival rate will be. Hearing this, Feng Zhou was still a little unwilling to give up. Is there really no way? Alternatively, you can also summon the first fleet of Supreme Intelligence. Because he lost his vision of the universe again, Gao Qiang didn't know what was happening among the galaxies at the moment. Now, with Wei Yan leading the way, he briefly left Zhuluo and other familiar people and walked in the ideal city. Commander Security, please stay. At this time, a woman wearing only a simple robe came forward and blocked Wei Yan's way. I'm not welcome. Wei Yan raised his eyebrows and walked behind Gao Qiang. Lord. The woman was silent for a moment, then stretched out her hand and bowed gently. Please follow me. There was no soil behind the woman, but large areas of rocky ground. Due to the special characteristics of the ideal city, these grounds were not uneven, but smooth as if they had been polished. Follow the woman's footsteps and continue forward. Gao Qiang leaned close to Wei Yan's ear and whispered, your reputation doesn't seem to be good enough. They were all his subjects, but Wei Yan was actually stopped outside. Gao Qiang had never seen this happen to other people before. It will always be like this when there are too many people, and there is nothing we can do about it. Wei Yan shrugged helplessly. Besides, that person is not targeting me. That's why I brought you here. Except for you, everyone else who comes here will be treated the same. You have such a bad temper. Hearing this, Gao Qiang's curiosity was aroused. The person Wei Yan wanted to take him to see didn't seem to be so easy to deal with. I don't know how long they walked. Gao Qiang only felt like he had experienced a rise and fall in the morning. The woman leading the way finally stopped. At this time, Gao Qiang glared at Wei Yan fiercely. He said it was not because of his bad reputation. Who would come to stop someone from a distance of 108,000 miles? Ahem. Wei Yan coughed lightly. Then he kept signaling Gao Qiang with his eyes, asking Gao Qiang to look forward. Following Wei Yan's gaze, Gao Qiang followed and saw a body like white jade.